Hello everyone, this is Will from Art to Will coming at you with another episode of Sketchy Chats. For this week, I'll be showing you the process of me sketching a Warhammer Plague Marine. Also, just to clarify, I'm not working for Games Workshop and this has nothing to do with their official IP, it's just my fan art. When people think of fan art, by definition, it's artwork created by fans of certain series or characters or what have you, and sort of doing their own interpretation on those things. And I think the most common forms of that people tend to think of are, posters that they see at comic book conventions or anime conventions. And I just want to share my thoughts on doing fan art and what are some of the potential benefits that you might not have thought of, especially if you don't just want to do, like posters of characters and whatnot. First of all, before we start with talking about fan art itself, I think it'll be a good idea to talk about the two disciplines that are associated with being a professional artist, because these two disciplines are different from each other even though a lot of people may think they're the same thing. So obviously the two that I'm talking about is being a designer versus being an illustrator. Oftentimes artists who are designers can also illustrate and illustrators can also design, right? But these two disciplines themselves are very different. The job of a designer is to come up with creative solutions, design solutions to to solve a problem of the production, which means the the product of their design, or the result of their design will not directly be shown to the audience. It goes down the pipeline of production and is utilized and turned into something that can be shown to the audience, as opposed to the illustrator. Their their product, which is the illustration that they do, goes directly to the audience. That's one of the major differences between the two. Since these two roles are, different in terms of what they do, obviously the skills required to do them are going to be different. For example, a good designer doesn't necessarily need to have the best painting skills, but they definitely need to have good ideas as well as be very creative in terms of problem solving, and as well as, being very aware of the limitations of their design. Whereas the illustrator needs to focus on, composing an appealing image. So to maximize the aesthetics of the illustration, as well as taking into consideration of the treatment style of the illustration, also be very aware of how to effectively use their time. As you can see, due to how different these two roles are, you can imagine fan art could be also utilized very differently based off these two differences. A designer may be inspired by a certain franchise and decide to design based off of the that franchise's aesthetic, rather than what an illustrator would often do is what we commonly know as fan art, which is taking, not worrying about the design because the design is already established, and utilizing the existing designs to create an appealing illustration. So for students out there who are still learning, whether you're trying to be an illustrator or a designer, doing fan art could be very helpful. Aside from just the skill development aspect of it, I think an often overlooked benefit of doing fan art is the thing about doing art is one of the most important things you have to be able to do is to stay motivated, right? Because the skill and technical aspects of the skill and technical improvements come with time and experience. There's not that many ways to speed up that process, and oftentimes it's really frustrating for newcomers, especially to compare themselves to a seasoned professional and realize how like the vastness of their skill differences, right? And it seems like an impossibility to be able to get there. But if you were able to be motivated and you enjoy the process of creation, then it would be much easier because you wouldn't it'd be harder for you to give it up. Every artist out there, whether they're a veteran or new, right, all started down this path because they were a fan of something, whether it be video games, comic books, or movies. And if you were able to, stay motivated and enjoy creating art because of fan art, as well as getting practice through it, there's nothing but benefit. But one thing that you do have to be aware of is what exactly do you want to get out of doing a fan art piece. But if we can at least stay motivated, at least you'll be making steps towards your goal of, maybe becoming a working professional artist or whatever it is that you were trying to do in art. Another thing I think fan art really helps you with is to figure out what you like about something and why. There's a lot of benefits to understand why you like something, and I think the best way to internalize that information is through doing it. For example, I really enjoy the Warhammer franchise, right? I think the designs are very interesting, and for one reason or another, I gravitate towards some of those designs. Therefore, I would like to be able to understand what exactly do I like about it, right? Is it the bulky shapes? Is it, the details that within those designs, or and through trying to create a piece of my own, it allows me to experiment firsthand and try to understand it through practice. So by doing a fan art piece in this way, you are trying to follow a certain aesthetic rule. Therefore, you almost like you're almost basically doing a mock prompt of that specific project. And that is definitely one of the best ways to learn design, which is to give yourself prompts that include, rules and limitations and aesthetic choices. Obviously, if you only study uh, one franchise, let's say, or one set of characters with similar design rules, your designs will lean slowly towards that specific look. Maybe that's what you want, right? And it's not a bad place to start off of. In fact, for example, if you wanted to work for, let's say, Games Workshop on Warhammer properties, you should be doing tons of designs based off that universe, right? And trying to capture their established design design aesthetic as much as you can. Of course, that limits you maybe in finding work in other companies, but at least it's a good place to kind of help you start learning. Moving forward from that, one thing we've already touched up upon is, doing fan art obviously will help you with practicing the illustration process. A lot of students especially they like to get a, they see a really interesting, a really good piece of illustration, and they're like, wow, I want to be able to do that. But they don't have the character design or the environment design already established, so they have to do the design. They jump into it directly with no design whatsoever, right? And that's a challenge that most professionals in the working industry don't do. And of course, it's going to be almost impossible for you to be able to come up with anything that's close to as good as what you're comparing yourself to, because you're doing two jobs at once, right? And what fan art allows you to do is to take away half of the workload instantaneously, because now you have the design, right? You have the color palette, you have all the information that you need, and all you have to focus on is the illustration process, right? Which is scene setup, right? Composition, lighting, all those things, right? All those technical illustration aspects that you get to practice and focus in on without having to worry about the design itself, right? And of course, there are infinite variabilities in between those two extremes that I've talked about, right? One being the design focused aspect, the other being the illustration focused aspect. You can have any sort of variation in between that. And that's the great thing about doing fan art, is that it provides you with an anchor, which is the fandom itself. And whichever way you decide to create based off of that idea is up to you, right? And it just makes for a very interesting creative exercise in the end. To summarize, first of all, fan art keeps your passion alive, right? It helps you to stay motivated because you're going to be working on things that you already enjoy. You know? And second of all, fan art allows you to focus in on a design aesthetic that you like, and try to break down and analyze why you like it, therefore helping you internalize the information that you're processing. And lastly, of course, fan art is a great way to practice the illustration process in general, as you don't need to worry about designing the characters or the environments as much. You already have an established design that you can work off of, and you only need to focus on the illustration aspect of it. And fan art or not, if you enjoy doing something and it helps you to improve your skills and keeps you motivated, that's more than enough reason to keep doing that thing, right? And that is it for me for this week's nonsensical rambling. That is Sketchy Chats. And as always, please leave your feedback, questions, and topics you want me to cover in the future, and as well as ideas you'd like to see me sketch down in the comments below. And I will see you next time.